Hey, delighted to have you with me for this video. So today we're going to talk about SEO for your freelance website. Now this could be a series of video and we could go into massive detail, but I'm going to try and give like the key points around what you should do or what you should be thinking about with search engine optimization on your website. So the first thing to say is it's going to take time, particularly if it's a brand new website, a new freelance business, and you've just kind of bought the domain name, you've built the website out. It's going to take time. We're talking months rather than weeks. Anybody who kind of sells their services or kind of shares that isn't the case, you probably need to turn the other way quite quickly because it isn't a short-term fix. I'll link to the video on Google Ads, which is slightly different in that you can get campaigns live and drive traffic from Google to your website very quickly, but very different to SEO, which we're talking about today. So organic search traffic that comes through to your site from search engines, which you're not paying for in terms of the clicks themselves. So first of all, let's talk about some of the technical fundamentals. Now, depending on what platform you use, whether it's WordPress or Webflow or any of these web builders that are out there these days, what you want to make sure is your website is nice and fast. Now, a lot of these web builders, thankfully, these days are improving that so that your website on both desktop and mobile and tablet is running really quickly. It's not a massive organic search SEO factor directly, actually. However, you can imagine, Google wants to send traffic to high quality user experiences. So if someone lands on your website and it takes 3, 4, 5 seconds to load, we all know what it's like, right? People are impatient these days. They just often move on to a competitor as well. So they bounce from your website and they go on to the next search result. So you're going to lose out, and Google doesn't want to keep doing that. So even though the speed in and of itself isn't actually a very clear factor according to what they share with us, you can see the indirect benefits of having a fast website. So that's an important factor. There are some other basic things, and I won't get too technical here, around having a sitemap and a robots.txt file. These are all things that just help Google's bots or search engines bots crawl your website, make it as easy as possible for them to find and index your website and their results. So you might just want to do a little bit of searching yourself on that, but most website platforms, or even if you've had somebody build your website, ask them about this and just make sure those fundamentals are in place. And a final one on the fundamental technical side of it is that you have a secure website. So the little padlock you see in the top left of the browser, that should be kind of closed and green. Sometimes you'll see it where it's like red and it shows as a non-secure website. Google's explicitly displaying those sites now. So not only is it not good for your SEO, it shows like a lack of trust and credibility in a site, so it can put users off. It's what's called an SSL certificate. Sometimes with your hosting platform, you'll just get it for free, or it can be around £60 a year. Absolutely worth investing in. And again, whoever sets up your web hosting or what provider you're using, just check. Some of them have it already built in. So let's move on to more interesting stuff once you've got those fundamentals in place. Let's talk about the content on the website. So depending on what it is you do, what you want to make sure is that you create specific pages about each of your services. So rather than having like a one-page website, and there are benefits for a one-page website, undoubtedly, but say, for example, you offer 3 or 4 services, or maybe to different niches as well. So let's say, for example, you're a social media marketer, okay? Now, it might be that you work across multiple platforms. So let's say you work across LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. Okay, so rather than having one page, and you can certainly talk about this on your homepage a little bit about your overall profile and your expertise, but you want to have specific individual service pages about each of those services. So let's say, for example, you work with architects, okay, and your LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube are the 3 platforms you work with. So what you might want to do is have a page around YouTube for architects, okay? And this page is going to be all exclusively about your service as a YouTube kind of consultant or marketer for architects. So you're going to have explaining what your service is. Maybe you're going to have some testimonials from architects who have worked with you on YouTube. You're going to have some case studies. Maybe you have some links to some videos you've run for clients. You're going to have a very clear messaging all around YouTube for architects, and then a call to action, of course, to get them to book a consultation or whatever it is you want them to do. Now, the benefit of that is twofold, really. So from an SEO perspective, it's very hard for Google to pick out if you just have one page of all these different offers and different services for different audiences. How are they going to rank that page in their search results, right? It's very difficult for them to choose what to do so for. But if you have a page about YouTube marketing for architects, someone searching that on Google, which may well be a search query they enter, your page all about YouTube marketing for architects is much more likely to be picked up by Google as a ranking opportunity, because the page does exactly what it says on the tin. And if you go back to what search engines are trying to do, they're trying to provide high quality results that answer the query of the searcher. That very clearly answers the query because it's an architect, they're looking for YouTube marketing, it's exactly what you provide, and you have a very good page all about YouTube marketing for architects, explaining the service that you offer, the benefits, etc., etc. So that's why you want to break out your service pages into individual services and also for target audiences as well. So that's one of the first things, and often a mistake where people just kind of list all their different services on one page, and that's never really going to rank for organic search. Now, I'm not saying it's easy by doing what I've just suggested, because obviously there's competition out there, but you're going to give yourself a much higher chance, and particularly the more niche you get, of ranking for those search terms. And I'll come back to how you can link those pages in a moment as well. Now, what they call on-page SEO, there are different phrases and terminology, but in essence, you want to optimize that page for the keyword you've chosen, or topic, if you like. So again, if we choose YouTube marketing for architects, you're going to want to make sure that's in the page title. You're going to want to make sure that's in the description. You're going to want to make sure that's written throughout the copy. Maybe you have subheadings and stuff. Now, you don't want to just force this and like what they call keyword stuffing and just repeat the phrase time and again. Not only is that a horrible user experience, it's very obvious when you read it. Actually, it doesn't even assist with Google anymore. I mean, maybe years ago that helped, but the semantics they're so much better at. So you don't have to write the exact phrase. So it could be, video marketing for architectural practices or something like that, or design studios. So the same, you don't have to put the same phrase in time and again. But what you do want to get across is that is what this page is about, and give those indicators to Google. So have that in the page title and the meta description. So when you search on Google and you see those two, kind of like the heading and then the description below the paragraph, that's what that is. And on the back end of your website, you'll be able to amend that. You should be able to find that quite easily. And again, just consider the URL as well. Sometimes people forget that. So what's called the URL parameter, which comes after your, businessname.com/, and then you can have YouTube marketing for architects as the URL itself. That is also a small indicator to Google of what that page is about. And that's what you want to say, raise your hand. My page is all about YouTube marketing for architects. Therefore, you should consider ranking it because it's high quality content, etc., etc. Now, the third part, and probably the most important part, because these are some of the basics you get in place. You may optimize and tweak over time, but fundamentally, those things will stay. Now it's actually about creating new content on your site. You can't just build a website with 4, 5, 6 pages and just expect it to rank and just kind of leave it. You have to, if you want to take, SEO seriously for your freelance business, you have to be creating new content. And new content often is best in the form of blogs. And you might call it something different, but let's just use blog as a term everyone knows, right? So you have a blog section on your website, and maybe every week or fortnightly, the more the better, to be honest, you create some content around the topics that are relevant to your target audience, which is key. So sticking with the same kind of example we've been using up to now, let's say you might do a video on how to create excellent introductions for architect videos. Okay, so you might do a blog on what you need to get across in the first 10, 15 seconds of a video for architects. Next week, you might write a post about, how to increase engagement on your YouTube videos for architects. So it could be, running competitions or asking questions, getting people to comment and advice, those sort of things. So again, that's I'm not a YouTube marketer for architects, but hopefully you understand what I'm trying to say here is that you consider what are the topics your audience is searching for. You can use some of the tools out there in terms of keyword research to back that up with data, and then create content for each of those terms. Now, this has a twofold effect, really, and probably more, actually. But a couple of the two major things it will do. It will drive new traffic, because if one of your prospects is searching these queries, they're likely to come across your blog post because you've answered a very specific query, if the content's good. Now, that's great because that drives that traffic. There is a small chance that actually, if they're searching for that, they may actually be interested in your service. Maybe not at that time, but, in future, they could come back and engage with your services or inquire. But the other benefit is it improves your credibility and authority and expertise in Google's eyes. So there's more trust in your website because you've written a whole wealth of content on the area. You've shown your credibility and expertise. So Google's saying, oh, wow, this is a legitimate website. They've got some really good content. People are coming through to the site. They're staying on the site. They're looking at more content. They're taking action. So that means that the services pages we talked about earlier, so those headline pages of YouTube marketing for architects, you have a better chance of those ranking because the overall domain authority, as it's called, is improved in Google's eyes because you're creating this valuable content. Now, also, as I mentioned earlier, you can link through to those service pages. So if you create a fantastic blog all around, how to increase engagement on architect videos for YouTube, you can link to the page you have, which lists your service for that particular audience, where you then have your call to action as well. So that keeps the user's flow and user journey really nice. And if you're just adding to this content over time, you'll learn what works well, and you'll be able to iterate and improve. So really whistle-stop tour. Like I said earlier, you could talk a lot about this topic of SEO for your freelance website. But if you do some of those things I just mentioned consistently and do them well, you're going to set yourself up for success on SEO. It does take time, so this is not a short-term fix, and you're going to have to be consistent with it and stick it out. But I know many a freelancer who started doing this in the early days of their freelance business and now solely relies on the inbound leads they get from SEO and organic search, and literally sustains their whole business in a very successful way. So it's a very powerful channel, but the reason why it's so successful is that most people will give up and they won't stick out over a period of time. So if you're willing to do that and be consistent with some of the things I shared, you can really see success with SEO for your freelance website.